Dr. Kim Soo pushed his glasses up his nose as he stared at the computer screen. The numbers dancing across the monitor made no sense. For 3 months, he had been tracking strange energy readings from deep space, but tonight something was different. Something was coming. Professor Kim called his student, Park Min, from across the underground laboratory. The scanners are going crazy. Look at these readings. Kim Soo walked over to where Park Min stood. The young man's face was pale as he pointed at the detection equipment. Red lights flashed everywhere, and the machines beeped loudly. "What is it?" Kim Soo asked, though he already felt a cold fear in his stomach. "I don't know, but it's big, and it's almost here." Far above Seoul, invisible ships hung in the night sky. Inside the largest vessel, Commander Vexvel watched Earth through his viewing screen. His blue skin glowed softly in the dim light of the command center. Around him, other members of the Valthari collective prepared their most powerful weapon. "Begin the cleansing protocol," Vexvel ordered. His voice was calm, almost bored. To him, this was just another day's work. Another primitive species to remove from the galaxy. The weapon activated without sound or flash. It moved across Earth like invisible water, touching every human mind at the same time. It was designed to be gentle, to simply turn off human consciousness, like switching off a light. The bodies would remain perfect and empty, ready to be used by the Valthari, as workers and servants. But something went wrong in his laboratory. Kim Soo suddenly grabbed his head and screamed. Park Min fell to his knees, shaking. All around the world, humans began to experience the same thing. But instead of their minds going quiet, something deep inside them woke up. Lee Dae-hyun was working the night shift at Seoul General Hospital when the first victims arrived. She had been a nurse for 10 years, but she had never seen anything like this. Patients came in screaming about monsters chasing them, about being burned by fire that wasn't there, about falling from great heights while lying in their beds. "Nurse Lee," called Dr. Choi from the emergency room. "You need to see this." Dae-hyun rushed over to find a young boy on the examination table. He was asleep, but his body was covered in scratches and bite marks. Fresh blood ran from the wounds. "How is this possible?" Dae-hyun whispered. "He's been sleeping the whole time." "Look at his brain activity," Dr. Choi said, pointing to the machine monitoring the boy's brainwaves. "He's dreaming, but the dreams are somehow becoming real." The boy suddenly sat up with his eyes still closed. "The shadow dog," he said in a small, frightened voice. "It's still chasing me." Behind him, Dae-hyun saw something impossible. A dark shape, like a dog made of smoke and teeth, stood in the corner of the room. It was looking right at her, with glowing red eyes. In space, Commander Vexvel stared at his instruments in confusion. "What is happening?" he demanded. "The humans should be unconscious by now." "Sir," reported one of his officers, "the weapon is not working as planned. Human brain patterns are fighting back. They're changing the signals somehow." "That's impossible," Vexvel said. "No species has ever resisted the cleansing protocol." But the humans were doing more than resisting. They were turning the weapon into something else entirely. Every nightmare, every childhood fear, every scary story ever told was being pulled from the depths of human memory and given form. Back at the university, Kim Soo helped Park Min to his feet. Around them, the laboratory equipment sparked and smoked, but that wasn't what made them stare in wonder. Standing near the door was a small girl, maybe 8 years old. She wore a white dress and had long black hair that covered her face, but Kim Soo could see through her, like looking through colored glass. "Who are you?" Park Min asked in a shaking voice. The girl lifted her head, and they could see her face was pale and her eyes were completely black. "I'm Minji's friend," she said, in a voice that sounded like it came from far away. "Minji dreamed about me, and now I'm here to help." Kim Soo realized what was happening. The alien weapon hadn't destroyed human consciousness. Instead, It had connected all human minds together and given power to their deepest thoughts and fears. Children's imaginary friends were becoming real. Nightmares were walking the streets. But most importantly, these dreams and nightmares were fighting back against the aliens. On the hospital's roof, Daehyun watched the sky. Strange shapes moved between the buildings. Some looked like people, but wrong somehow. Others looked like creatures from old Korean folk tales. Dragons made of light flew through the air. Warriors from ancient times marched down the streets. They wanted to erase us, Daehyun said to herself. But they woke up everything we ever imagined, instead. The war had begun, but it wasn't the war anyone expected. This would be a battle fought, not just with weapons, but with dreams, nightmares, and the power of human imagination itself. Captain Yoon, Ji-ho crouched behind the destroyed car, bullets flying over his head. The Valtheri soldiers had landed in Hongdae just after sunrise, their strange blue weapons cutting through concrete like paper. His squad of 12 men was down to 5, and they were running out of ammunition fast. "Sir, we need to fall back," shouted Sergeant Kim over the sound of alien weapons. "We can't hold this position much longer." But Ji-ho wasn't looking at the enemy anymore. He was staring at Private Choi-bin, who sat against the wall with his eyes closed, shaking like he was having a bad dream. "Choi, wake up," Ji-ho called. "This is not the time to sleep." Choi-bin's eyes snapped open, but he looked confused. "Captain, I just had the strangest dream. My grandfather was there. He was wearing his old army uniform from the Korean War." "That's nice, but we have bigger problems right now," Ji-ho started to say, but then he stopped. Something was moving in the smoke behind Choi-bin. A figure stepped out of the gray haze. It was an old man in a faded military uniform, the kind soldiers wore 70 years ago. The man was see-through, like looking at someone through water, but he carried a rifle that looked completely real. "Grandfather," Choi-bin whispered, his eyes wide. The ghost soldier looked at his grandson and smiled. Then he turned toward the Valthari position, raised his rifle, and let out a battle cry that made Ji-ho's hair stand up. The old man charged forward, firing his ancient weapon at the alien soldiers. Impossible as it seemed, the ghost's bullets found their targets. 2 Valtheri soldiers fell, blue blood spreading across the street. "What just happened?" Sergeant Kim asked, his mouth hanging open. Ji-ho didn't answer because he didn't know. But he didn't know one thing: they weren't fighting alone anymore. Deep, underground, in the subway tunnels beneath Seoul, Dr. Kim Soo sat with about 30 other survivors. The tunnels had become their home since the attack began. They had food, water, and medical supplies, but more importantly, they had each other, Kim. Soo looked at his equipment, small machines he had carried from his laboratory. The readings were incredible. "Look at this," he said to the people gathered around him. "The energy patterns are spreading from every human settlement on Earth." "What does it mean?" asked Mrs. Park, an old woman who had been a teacher before. "The invasion. It means we're not just defending ourselves anymore," Kim Soo explained. "The alien weapon was supposed to turn off our minds, but instead it connected them, all of us. Every human on the planet is linked together now, and somehow, our thoughts are becoming real." Near the back of the tunnel, Han So-young sat drawing in her sketchbook. She was an artist who painted murals on building walls before the aliens came. Now she drew to keep herself calm, to stop thinking about the terrible things happening above. Ground dot. As she drew a picture of a guardian spirit, something amazing happened. The figure on the paper began to glow softly. Then, as she watched in shock, it stepped off the page and stood before her as a real, living being made of light and hope. "Did anyone else see that?" So-young asked in a shaky voice. Everyone in the tunnel turned to look. The spirit bowed to So-young, then began walking toward the tunnel entrance, as if it was going to protect them from danger. "This is incredible," Kim Soo said, his scientific mind racing. The Velthari thought our minds worked like theirs, neat, organized, predictable. But human minds are messy. We dream about things that never existed. We tell stories about monsters and heroes. We remember our ancestors even if we never met them. When they tried to control our minds, they gave power to all of that chaos. Above ground, strange things were happening on the alien ships. Commander Vexville stood on his command bridge, staring at reports he couldn't believe. "Sir," said one of his officers, "our navigation systems are showing targets that aren't there. Our sensors detect human soldiers in places where our cameras show nothing." "How is this possible?" Dexville demanded. "We don't know, sir. But crew members on Deck 7 report seeing strange figures walking through the corridors. They look human, but they move in ways that don't follow our understanding of physics." Dexville felt something he had never experienced before: fear. His species had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never faced anything like this. High above Seoul, Lieutenant Park Yeon flew her F-16 fighter jet toward the alien mothership. Her mission was simple: get close enough to fire her missiles and hope they did some damage before the aliens shot her down. But as she climbed higher into the sky, something impossible appeared next to her plane. It was a warrior on horseback. But the horse seemed to be made of starlight, and the warrior wore armor that looked like it came from ancient Korea. The warrior looked at her through her cockpit window and raised his sword in salute. Then both horse and rider charged toward the alien ship, moving through the air as if it was solid ground. Park Yeon smiled for the first time since the invasion began. Humanity was fighting back with more than just weapons now. They were fighting with every story ever told, every dream ever dreamed, and every hero ever imagined. The Velthari had wanted to erase human minds, but instead they had set free the power of human imagination itself. Supreme Coordinator Velthen stood in his control room on the Velthari homeworld, millions of light years from Earth. For 10,000 years, he had never felt anything but calm certainty. His people had removed all messy emotions from their minds long ago. They lived in perfect peace, sharing thoughts without conflict or doubt. But today, something was wrong. Velthen kept looking over his shoulder, feeling like something was watching him from the shadows. His skin felt cold, and his hands shook slightly as he tried to work. These sensations made no sense. The Velthari had evolved beyond such primitive responses. Supreme Coordinator called Science Director Morvex from across the room. Her voice, usually steady and emotionless, now had a strange tremor. "I'm receiving disturbing reports from across our network." "What kind of reports?" Velthen asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Our people are experiencing feelings, emotions we eliminated from our species thousands of years ago. Fear, anger, suspicion. They don't even have words for these sensations in our language anymore." Velthen felt his chest tighten with something he couldn't name. All across their vast civilization, Velthari citizens were calling their leaders in panic. They spoke of shadows that moved when no one was looking, of voices whispering things they couldn't understand, of terrible dreams that felt more real than waking life. "How is this possible?" Velthen demanded. "The human contamination," Morvex replied, consulting her instruments with shaking hands. "When we connected their minds to our network, we didn't just try to erase them. We accidentally opened a pathway. Their thoughts, their fears, their chaotic emotions, they're spreading through our consciousness like a virus." On Earth, the war had become something no military textbook had ever described. Soldier Otaman crouched in the ruins of what used to be a shopping mall in Busan. Around him, his squad prepared for another alien attack, but Otaman felt different now. As he planned their defense, strategies appeared in his mind that he had never learned. Ancient Chinese General Sun Tzu whispered battle tactics in his ear. The rage of Viking warriors from centuries past filled his heart with fierce courage. Somehow, he could access the knowledge and experience of every fighter who had ever lived. Sergeant O called Private Lee. How do you know all this? You're talking about battle formations I've never heard of. Otaman paused, unsure how to explain. I don't know, he said honestly. The knowledge just appears when I need it. Like humanity's entire military history is stored in my head now. Across the city, teacher Jung Haijin sat in a basement with 20 frightened children. Their parents were either fighting the aliens or already dead. The children cried for their mothers and fathers, and Jung Haijin felt helpless to comfort them. But then something wonderful happened as she spoke to the children. Her words carried a special power. She found herself saying exactly the right things, with the wisdom of every teacher, every parent, every caregiver who had ever soothed a scared child. Her voice held the gentle authority of millions of people who had dedicated their lives to protecting the young. Don't be afraid, she told them, and somehow they believed her completely. The monsters are scary, but we have heroes too, and every one of you is braver than you know. The Velthari decided to send their most powerful weapons to Earth, creatures designed to attack the human mind directly. These beings could make anyone doubt themselves, feel hopeless, or turn against their friends. They had never failed before, but when they arrived on Earth and tried to use their powers, something impossible happened. The humans seemed to know exactly how to fight them. Research specialist Kexmore watched in shock as human soldiers used techniques that perfectly countered every psychic attack. How do they know our methods? He gasped into his communicator. We've never fought this species before. What Kexmore didn't understand was that humans had been telling stories about evil aliens who could control minds for decades. They had written books, made movies, and played games about creatures exactly like the Velthari. Every possible scenario had already been imagined and defeated in human fiction, in a library in Gwangju. Writer Bei Sujin barricaded herself behind overturned tables as alien soldiers searched the building. She clutched her notebook, where she had been writing stories about brave heroes fighting impossible odds. As she watched in amazement, her fictional characters began stepping out of the pages. The brave knight she had created last week materialized and drew his sword. The clever detective from her mystery novel appeared and began analyzing the alien's weaknesses. The magical girl from her children's story floated in the air, ready to protect the innocent. We've been preparing for this our whole lives, Sujin whispered to herself. Every story we told, every nightmare we imagined, every time we asked, what if aliens invaded? It was all practice for this moment. Back on the Velthari homeworld, their perfect society was falling apart. Some aliens embraced these new emotions, discovering feelings they had forgotten they were missing. Others fought desperately to return to their emotionless state, terrified of the chaos in their minds. But it was too late. Humanity's beautiful, terrible, chaotic consciousness had infected their orderly world. The Velthari were learning what it meant to truly live, with all the pain and joy that came with it. Fighter pilot Lim Duhayan gripped her controls as her F-16 screamed through the sky above Seoul. Her radar screen showed things that should not exist. Enemy ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Her own missiles seemed to fly in circles through time. Most confusing of all, her instruments showed friendly aircraft that registered as both destroyed and perfectly fine at the same time. This is Ghost Leader to all units. She spoke into her radio, trying to keep her voice steady. I have visual on. I don't know what I have visual on. Flying next to her modern jet was an old F-86 Sabre from the Korean War. The plane looked exactly like the museum pieces she had seen as a child, complete with faded paint and bullet holes in the wings. Through the cockpit window, she could see the pilot, an old man in a leather flight jacket who looked transparent, like a ghost. The phantom pilot looked at her and gave her a thumbs up. Then, his ancient plane dove toward a massive Velthari cruiser, the kind of ship that could destroy an entire city. His old machine guns should have been useless against advanced alien armor. but somehow his bullets tore through the enemy's shields like they were made of paper. How is this possible? Duhayan muttered, but she didn't have time to think about it. More alien fighters were coming her way. On the ground in Seoul, Marine Sergeant Kong Minho led his squad through streets that looked like a war zone from a nightmare. Buildings were destroyed, cars burned, and alien soldiers hunted humans with weapons that made no sound but could cut through concrete. Minho's squad had started with 12 men. Now only 5 were still alive. But as he moved through the rubble, he realized they were not fighting alone. His dead comrades walked beside them as see-through figures, still carrying their weapons and still fighting the enemy. "Sergeant Park," Minho called to one of the ghosts. "Can you hear me?" The spirit of his old friend turned and nodded. Park had died 2 days ago when an alien plasma bolt hit him in the chest. Now he pointed toward a building where enemy soldiers were hiding, giving Minho information that could save the lives of his remaining men. But the strangest part was the knowledge that filled Minho's head. As he planned each attack, he could hear the voices of spies and soldiers from throughout history. They whispered secrets about enemy movements, told him where to place his men, and shared tactics that had won battles centuries ago. "How do you know all this stuff?" asked Private Choi, following Minho through an alley. "I don't know," Minho replied honestly. "It's like every soldier who ever lived is helping us fight." Deep underground, Dr. Kim Soo sat in his command center, surrounded by computers and communication equipment. General name Hyo-sung, the highest-ranking military officer still alive in South Korea, leaned over his shoulder to look at the battle. "Reports, Doctor." "These reports make no sense," the general said. "Our pilots are fighting alongside aircraft from 70 years ago. Our ground troops are being advised by the ghosts of dead soldiers. How do I explain this to my superiors?" Kim Soo pointed to his instruments, which showed energy patterns unlike anything in scientific literature. "General, the Velthari are losing because they're fighting the wrong war. They brought advanced technology and logical strategies. But we're not fighting with just weapons anymore. We're fighting with imagination itself." "What do you mean?" "Every story we ever told about heroes defeating impossible odds is now real. Every historical figure we remember as brave and strong is fighting beside us. Every fictional character who never gave up is standing with our soldiers. The aliens can't understand this because they eliminated imagination from their minds long ago." Above Seoul, the sky had become a battlefield that followed no rules of physics. Modern jets flew alongside dragons made of light and shadow. Ancient Korean warriors rode through the air on horses that galloped on clouds. Folk heroes from old stories swung swords that could cut through alien metal like butter. Artist Han So stood on a rooftop, painting furiously on the side of a building. But these were not ordinary paintings. As she finished each figure, it stepped off the wall and joined the battle. Legendary generals from Korea's ancient past appeared to command modern soldiers. Heroes from children's stories materialized to protect the innocent. She painted a dragon with scales that sparkled like stars, and it flew away to attack alien ships. She drew a warrior queen from the Three Kingdoms period, and the queen appeared with armor that could deflect energy weapons. Every stroke of Soyoung's brush brought new allies to humanity's desperate fight in space. Supreme Coordinator Velton watched his fleet fall apart. His most advanced computers, machines that could predict the outcome of any battle, were shutting down one by one. They couldn't process combat scenarios that included dragons, ghosts, and fictional characters fighting alongside regular human soldiers. "Sir," reported his science officer, "our AI systems are experiencing what humans might call nervous breakdowns. They cannot understand an enemy that uses impossible weapons and impossible tactics." Velthan felt something he had never experienced before: complete defeat. His species had conquered hundreds of worlds, with logic and superior technology, but humanity fought with something far more powerful: the unlimited creativity of minds that dared to dream of victory against any odds. Retreat to the outer system, he ordered, his voice heavy with unfamiliar emotions. We cannot win against an army that recruits soldiers from pure imagination. Dr. Kim Soo opened his eyes and found himself standing in the strangest place he had ever seen. The ground beneath his feet looked like the streets of Seoul, but the sky above showed the inside of an alien spaceship. Buildings from his neighborhood stood next to floating platforms and glowing control panels. Reality seemed to be folded and twisted like origami. Where am I? He asked aloud, his voice echoing strangely in the impossible space. You are in the network, came a familiar voice. Kim Soo turned to see Supreme Coordinator Velthan walking toward him, but the alien looked different now. His perfect blue skin showed wrinkles of worry. His eyes, once cold and emotionless, now showed fear, confusion, and something that might have been curiosity. You have destroyed everything we built, Velthan said, but he didn't sound angry. He sounded amazed. 10,000 years of perfect order, our entire civilization, contaminated by your chaos. Kim Soo shook his head. We didn't destroy anything. We showed you what you were missing. Around them, the strange landscape began to fill with people. Kim Soo saw teacher Jung Hae-jin, who had comforted frightened children during the war. Captain Yoon Ji-ho appeared, still wearing his battle-worn uniform. Artist Han So-young materialized, her hands still stained with paint from the murals that had brought heroes to life. But these weren't just the people, Kim Soo knew. Millions of other humans began appearing, soldiers and doctors, children and grandparents, writers and farmers. They all looked like ghosts, made of light, but they were more real than anything Kim Soo had ever experienced. We're all connected now, Kim Soo realized, feeling the thoughts and memories of every human flowing through his mind. But unlike the Valthari's forced unity, this connection let each person stay themselves while sharing with everyone else. How is this possible? Velthan asked, staring at the crowd of humans around them. Your weapon was supposed to erase our minds, explained Kim Soo. But human consciousness doesn't work the way you thought. We don't just think, we dream, we imagine. We remember stories our grandparents told us. When you tried to control us, you accidentally connected all of that together. Velthan looked around at the impossible landscape they stood in. But you're still individuals. How can you share one mind while remaining separate? Teacher Jung Hae-jin stepped forward, her voice gentle but strong. Because we learned that unity doesn't mean being the same. We can work together while still being ourselves. Your people spent so long making yourselves perfect that you stopped growing, Kim Soo continued. You removed anger, fear, doubt, even sadness from your minds. But those feelings aren't just problems to be solved. They're what make us alive. They're what help us change and become better. Writer Bae Soo-jin appeared next to Kim Soo, and as she did, the landscape around them shifted and changed. New buildings rose from the ground, while flowers bloomed in impossible colors. Her imagination was now so powerful that she could reshape reality with her thoughts. We're offering you a choice, Soo-jin said to Velthan. You can keep fighting us and be completely destroyed by everything we've ever dreamed or feared. Or you can join us and learn what it means to truly live. Velthan was quiet for a long moment. Around him, other Valthari began to appear in the network. Some looked terrified of the emotions they were feeling for the first time in thousands of years. Others seemed curious, even excited by these new sensations. I feel something, said one young Valthari female. Is this what you call wonder? Yes, laughed Jung Hae-jin. That's exactly what it is. The Valthari collective began to split apart. About half of them chose to stay and learn from humans, accepting the contamination of emotions as a gift rather than a curse. They wanted to remember what it felt like to hope, to dream, to struggle for something better. The other half fled, to distant parts of the galaxy, preferring their cold perfection to the messy, complicated experience of actually feeling things. Those who stayed began to change immediately. They learned to dream at night and wake up excited about what the day might bring. They discovered the joy of creating something new and the satisfaction of solving a difficult problem. Most importantly, they learned that being afraid sometimes made the brave moments more meaningful. Earth became something entirely new, a planet where the physical world and the world of dreams existed together. Soul streets were the same. But now dragons flew between the skyscrapers, and ancient heroes walked alongside modern people. Children played with imaginary friends who were no longer imaginary, and artists created works that could come to life. Kim Sue stood on his laboratory roof, looking out over the transformed city. The war was over, but they had won something much more important than a military victory. They had shown the universe that consciousness didn't have to be perfect to be powerful. The messy, complicated, sometimes dark human mind was not a weakness to be corrected, but a strength to be celebrated. In the end, humanity had survived by embracing everything they were, the good and the bad, the light and the darkness, the dreams and the nightmares. They had become living proof that the most beautiful things in the universe came not from perfection, but from the courage to remain wonderfully, chaotically, hopefully human.